G'day expats and welcome to another episode of Expat Chat, episode 79 today, climbing the ranks quickly and joined by my mate and colleague from the GC, James Ridley. How's things, mate?
Oh, mate, that was silky smooth. Things are terrific, actually. I'm enjoying a lovely afternoon here back on the GC Gold Coast. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, those that are dialing in today or tuning in, watching us on YouTube as well, join with my co-host, Brett Evans, the Managing Director for Atlas Wealth Group over in the Sandpit, the Middle East, as well as the Europe and Africa's region. How is the Sandpit treating you actually today, mate?
I should actually I gave you a bit of a service. I just called you a mate, but you're also the managing director for the Asia Pacific region as well, which is quite a nice little title as well. So let me give you your props there. So, mate, it's all good here. Schools are wrapping up this week. Going bush. It's all happening.
That's right. So, I mean, school holidays, I imagine everyone gets the hell out of there because of the heat. Just wants a bit of a holiday or...
To be honest, it's more the holiday than the heat right now. At the moment, for us, we're not going anywhere because the temperature and the lifestyle is pretty good still. So
yeah, good. Okay.
We've really got seesawing weather at the moment. Last week we got up there, high 30s, low 40s. Now it's back down again. So sort of a bit of a false summer coming through, which is good. Happy with that. But yeah, I mean, the world is so close. It's on our doorstep. So, and with Europe having such a late winter, the amount of people going skiing right now, I was talking to a couple yesterday, going in Austria, Switzerland.
Isn't it bizarre?
Georgia. So,
it's bizarre, a lot of European countries, the way that the ski season has really played out. Because you look at last year, I'm pretty sure they had the World Slalom Championships on a mountain which had no natural snow. It was all man-made, and the rest of the the rest of the mountain was completely empty with nothing on it. So it is a late season. It's actually been pretty good for Europe as well, in the sense that household energy for gas, the demand hasn't been as high, especially through this period of high inflation and naturally because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Won't get into it. But mate, today...
is now the time.
Yeah, that's right. Want to have a chat about whether it is now the time to be investing in property or buying property back in Australia. I think it's a good topic because we're going through the interest rate hike cycle still. We're going to cop our next one pretty soon in 2 weeks, and we just had the US FOMC meet last night. That was that 0.25% increase. I think a lot of people were thinking, hey, with all this financial institution instability, Silicon Valley Bank, and then you had Credit Suisse. Everyone's sort of wondering, oh yeah, will they pause? Will they go again? Yep. Obviously they went again, 0.25%. Before we jump into it, quick disclaimer, which is on my side today.
Mate, your bag, go for it.
That's it, mate. Anything you hear today or see today on the YouTube channel should not be construed as personal financial advice. It is for entertainment purposes only. If you do need advice, please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to give you that kind of specific advice. Now, let's jump into it. Is now the right time to buying property? Now, I mean, it's a very broad question. And when you look at probably the Australian property market right now, it has slowed right down. And it's hit and miss each month when you look at sort of a lot of the RP data that comes out, auction clearance rates and all those sort of things. Naturally, interest rates are having a bit of an impact on that.
Look, it is, and it's funny how, it's like probably one of my best articles I've ever written in terms of a viewership or readership point of view was an article I called "Who's Paying for Lunch?" And it's actually driven towards the nonsense that goes on in the Middle East and Asia region about people selling financial products that don't cost a thing, So who's in the back? What's the agenda? And it's funny how when we saw March with prices stabilize, how all the property pundits suddenly came out and said, now's the time to buy, now's the time to buy. And there's that great saying, one swallow doesn't make a winter. And to me, that personified the sort of the long journey we're on with property. And, people always talk about, when's the right time to buy? And everyone wants to be buying at the bottom or selling at the top or whatever it looks like. For every person that thinks they buy at the bottom, I can find someone else who bought even lower. So, and vice versa on the other side. So it's funny
That's it.
how everything's relative at the end of the day. And I think we just wanted to really make this episode just calming people down, because there's an industry out there that is great at generating FOMO, fear of missing out. Now they're like, okay, here's that once in a generation time, get in now, otherwise you're not going to get in again. It's different this time. That was 2020. Interest rates were record lows, levels that we haven't seen since Jesus paid fullback for Jerusalem. And to me, it's a different beast now. Property market relies on capital. When capital's flowing, debt is flowing, and therefore property does very well because it's a geared product. Whereas when capital sort of tightens up, which is what we're going through right now, then things start to slow down. But that doesn't mean it's a bad time to buy or a good time to buy. And I think what we wanted to do was get on here and dispel a few things. To me, like we said just before the call, to me, the right time to buy is when it suits you, not when someone on the other side of a webinar or a seminar or an email say, now's the time to buy. The reason they're telling you that is because they want to get a commission in a transaction. So they don't know you. They don't know what suits you. And, you and I talk to clients on a daily basis around the world who are buying properties back in Australia or looking at buying properties back in Australia. And, to me, it's one of those scenarios where you should do it if it suits you, not because there's a house in a location that you've never heard of that is being spruiked by someone else. And you know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There's a down in Melbourne. We see these things all the time. And, I had a great consult with a client just recently, and she was looking at buying commercial property. And I explained to her how commercial property works. And after an hour consult, she's like, you're right. It doesn't suit me. She was going to do it because she had the facility. She went through all the pain to get the loan. And the only reason she was going to go ahead with it was because she had the capacity to do it, not because it was the right investment for her. And then when we talked about, okay, buying commercial property, on a good day, you might be getting a 7% yield. It's going to cost you 5% in interest costs. So then we've got all the running costs, and then you got 6 months, rent-free periods and all that sort of stuff. Let's break it down. Do you want to go through all this process for a 1% return net? She's like, no, I didn't really think of that. So,
that's right.
Commercial property suits REITs or retirees who are looking for yield or all those different scenarios. It just doesn't suit everyone. And the same thing with that entry point in property. And there's obviously a lot of conversations going right now about the mortgage cliff and how that's looking, and we're going to find out very soon. And I think people are going to be underwhelmed. People are going to be underwhelmed because it's just not going to suddenly go boom.
That's right. I mean, it gets a lot of airtime right now back in Australia for all our listeners. The concept of this fixed rate mortgage cliff. April 800,000 kicking out. Watch out. But you've got to remember that it's not a case that everyone's gone out and got these mortgages all in April. It will be a very slow burn. Where yes, April, there's going to be some people coming off 2% and reverting to 5.5% or 6%, and then May. June, July, it will actually be a slow burn. And when we look at, I suppose, everyone's capital back in Australia, and it's something the RBA harps on a lot about, is everyone's still got a lot in their offset accounts. They've still got a lot in their redraw accounts. It's only just now that people are starting to eat into those buffers. But they're also saying that those buffers, they've never been fuller. Everyone's got a large amount in their coffers. So it does mean that, yes, it is going to be a slow burn. Those people that are lucky enough to be on the 2.24% fixed rate mortgage for another 6-7 months, good on them. That's, well done. They're all going to kick out to variable, but it will be a bit of a slow burn, I would say, on what we'll see probably on the property market. We know there's, as Brett just put it then, there's a lot less capital there. So there's a lot less people in the market to buy or even sell. So you're not going to see, I would say this year alone, you're not going to see a big market crash or a bubble pop straight away. Property, as we know, takes a long time. It takes a long time for anything to really happen then. And, it's the polar opposite to share markets, where share markets, they build in the worst or best case scenario pretty quickly, overnight or within an hour. We've seen that time and time again when you look at the best days and the worst days on the share market. When you go back and look at the S&P 500, the US index, if you invested 20 years ago and you missed all the best days on the share market, you would actually only be up by about 2 or 3%. So how ridiculous is that?
Yeah.
But when you look at property, it takes a long time for a big correction to happen. But we know with interest rates going up, it is a bit of a slow burn with that fixed rate mortgage slowly kicking out from April.
And it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. And it's sort of that the property market's going to be probably one step forward, two step back, one step forward, two step back. It's just going to sort of gradually wean off. And look, there'll be extremes. There'll be some suburbs that really feel the footfall. And those are probably those new build areas, the house and land packages and that sort of stuff that rely on who either don't have 2 cents to rub together or don't have the financial wherewithal to understand whether it's good investment or not. But to me, the biggest thing out of all these sort of scenarios really comes back to your capacity to service, your ability to maintain, and also the underlying asset and performance. And I know for a number of years, I've noticed clients holding properties for the sake of holding them as opposed to holding them because they're a good asset. And in our statements of advice, I've actually recommended clients sell a couple of properties before, because I've said, okay, here we've just had the biggest bull run in Australian property for the last 20, 30 years, and your property's still that. So if it's only at that in the best times, maybe you should look at, reorganising, some of the deck chairs and cleaning things up. So I think we're going to start to see a bit of that. I've started to see a bit of that in clients, but also to me, it really comes back to your goals, objectives, financial concerns, risk appetite.
That's it.
If you need somewhere to live, you're going to buy a property. If you're repatriating, simple. It suits you. Is it now the optimum time to get that best price? No one knows. No one knows.
No, that's right.
But to me,
no one sorry, Brett. I mean, you're right. No one has that crystal ball. And a good example, a client's going to be returning to Australia from the US in 6 months' time, and they would feel more comfortable having a main residence already purchased and, to a degree, some furniture already in it. So the time for them right now is perfect. That's it. They want to buy it right now, and that suits their personal situation. So you're right. Going back, property is probably not going to be right for everyone right now, and it might not be for another 12, 18, 24 months, especially given where interest rates are. It is a personal decision, and it is purely based on your financial situation. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you bought an investment and 12 months later you got buyer's remorse. Where you're going, oh shit, why did I actually invest in this? I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
From a financial aspect, I wasn't ready to take on this asset. Now I've got something that I can't easily turn over.
Yeah. And I think this is a good point. To me, it really comes back to the purpose of that property. We meet people who buy for the sake of buying, and we meet people who buy because they're looking for something particular, whether it's a rental per square meter or those sort of things. And they're very different approaches at the end of the day. I was reading an article from called Core Data. Tim Law or something is the guy there. And
that's right.
As he put it, for the March period, he said, yes, things have stabilised, but we're not there yet. Now, this is a guy that looks at property data every day, more so than we do. So I put a lot of precedence in that. Once again, there's no transaction on him saying that. He's not trying to sell or buy something. He's just giving you impartial information. So that's what people really should be embracing. And also, too, it comes back to, what's the purpose of the property? Is it, you feel like you need a toe in the water in the Australian market, it doesn't matter where in Australia as long as it is, then you need to be careful, because there's people who will sell you, a house and land package in the middle of nowhere. And we've seen a couple of firms offering some pretty extreme, and I use that word in a nice way, opportunities, because it's areas you've never heard of. And
that's it. Most of the returns of those kind of property spruiking type firms, the returns are actually driven by the tax refunds. So if you're investing in a property where the main return is generated from a refund of tax, that is not a good investment strategy. And I mean that from, it's in the middle of nowhere, it's in a derelict suburb, it's a cheap build.
Yeah,
If you're building a 4-bedroom house and it's only costing you 250 to 350,000,
it's
I'm
made of
sorry, but
cardboard.
those are that's it. It's exactly right. The average build, even a GJ Gardner build, these days is 500 to 650,000 for sort of a 4-bed or 2-bath. So you really got to question it. But if the returns are driven only through this concept of negative gearing and getting these tax refunds after the fact of lodging the tax return, that is not a good strategy, plain and simple.
House of cards. It's band-aids on band-aids, and any investment, whether it's property, shares, commodities, doesn't matter what it is, needs to stand on its own 2 feet and wipe its own nose. Because if you're justifying why you're holding the property, then you know it's the wrong property to hold. And we see this time and time again with people who collect an assortment of assets like baseball cards with no strategy behind it whatsoever. And you say to them, why? And they're like, oh, well, it just felt like I had to do this. It's like, well, why that one or why this one? It's like, I don't know. It's funny how people can sort of go off on a tangent. And, I think there's also a mindset too, where especially people who are raised by the older generation in terms of how they manage their assets, the older generation didn't have super and these sort of things at the time.
No,
So their super
right.
their super was a property portfolio, holding assets in their own name. And then when they needed some money, they sell off a property. Now,
That's it.
that's obviously capital gains tax. So when you're 70, the last thing you want to be doing is paying capital gains tax. So it doesn't make sense for a 70-year-old to have 10 properties in their own name. It makes sense to have that asset in super, generating zero capital gains tax and zero income tax. So it's that sort of devil in the deep blue sea, and everyone's different. Everyone's different. We meet people all walks of life on a daily basis. And as I said to them, said, when it comes to financial advice and what works for you, it's like buying a car. Do you want 2 doors, 4 doors, sunroof, yellow, pink, blue, whatever it is? It really comes back to what's important to you and then optimizing that scenario. It's amazing how I had a client recently who bought a property in 2020, did well, and couldn't wait to sell it. She goes, I'm not a landlord. She goes, it caused me so much drama and friction by living overseas that it wasn't even about the money. If you said to her, you're not going to make a gain, I'm just going to give you your money back, she would have taken it. It was that, from a, emotional point of view, it wasn't the right thing for her. She did it because others told her it was the right thing to do, not because what she wanted to do. And I guess that's what we're trying to say today is do what suits you, not suits others.
Yep, that's right. It is very personal. Everyone's situation is different. Get behind what you're really trying to achieve. What are those objectives? Property is a good investment asset, but it's not the be-all, end-all. Diversifying is paramount. And I mean, it's a really good point. I mean, I've got a client that's been on right now, and they're going to be heading over to France in about 12 months' time. They've got superannuation. They've got a property that's paid off, but they don't want to keep that property whilst they're overseas because they actually want to free up that capital to help fund their retirement whilst they're in France. So, they've got to capitalize on the main residence exemption while they're an Australian tax resident, because if they sell whilst they're overseas, well, they get smashed with tax. So property can be a really good investment asset, but at the end of the day, it comes down to individual circumstances and whether it's the right fit for you right now or in 12 months' time, 24 months' time, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's property, like other good assets, is a good asset to hold in the long term. It just comes back to, the specifics of that property and the motivations of that property and why you're buying it. I've got a client I'm helping with right now. He's got a mixed bag of properties. We're going through and sorting the wheat from the chaff. And it's funny how he's got a couple of properties out at Ipswich, which have done nothing. Yes, they're a good yield, but done absolutely nothing. And
no, it wouldn't surprise me.
And the funny thing is now he's sort of got to that point where when interest rates were low, life was okay. But now interest rates are up. So now his yield's getting it into, but he's got no capital growth. So he's net probably 1 to 2% per annum in growth and income. And I'm like, okay,
and I'll be
what's the motivation with this?
And a lot of there's a lot of suburbs or Ipswich, there's a lot of areas there which you wouldn't do too well by increasing your rent dramatically because the vacancy rates in some areas would still be higher. So you don't have someone else lining up next going, yeah, I'll pay that. So
Yeah.
that's a really important takeaway, that some areas, they won't do well through this period right now where, your rent agreement's coming up and you want to increase the rent. That's great. But if your property's in an area where vacancy rates are high and not the highest socio-demographic type of population, there isn't going to be too many people that are willing to pay that rent either. So that's a really important takeaway. And that's, I've obviously tiptoed around that subject particularly, but I think I'm driving home the point there.
Yeah, you don't want to price yourself out of the market. Just
Yeah,
because
that's right.
Rents in New Farm in Brisbane went up 15% doesn't mean rents in Ipswich or Gatton or
That's right.
whatever it might be, go up 15% as well. It comes back
Exactly.
to the metrics of that particular asset and what works for it. And it's a funny situation we're in right now, because as soon as the US Fed raised rates, the client WhatsApped me and said, "You're right." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, we said, yeah, that's still right." I said, "Look, think about it. The Fed stepped in, secured SVB. Silicon
Mm.
Valley Bank, for those on the call who not sure what SVB stands for. That was a case of poor management by a bank, not an endemic problem in the
Yeah,
financial system." And by
that's
the
it.
way,
Yep.
one of the directors on that on the SVB was actually a former Lehman Brothers guy. So I think he needs to give away the bank caper.
Uh,
And then
yes.
Credit Suisse. I mean, Credit Suisse has been a
Yeah.
long living problem. And the problem
Mm.
has not been the financial system. The problem is actually an Australian problem, believe it or not. So Australia's actually caused the demise of Credit Suisse. Not caused the demise, but started the process anyway, when they had a lot of leveraged assets with a firm called Greenhill, which is a invoice
Mm.
factoring business, and they pretty much gave them too much money, and they've been trying to dig
Yeah.
themselves out ever since. But the Swiss central bank stepped in, shored it up, gave
That's it.
UBS a nice fat line of credit and a lot of
Hmm.
leave passes, and said, "Take over Credit Suisse, shore things up," and off they go.
Yeah.
So to me, I don't think we're going to see contagion effect and things rippling out from here. It's certainly
No,
going to be heightening people's concerns, but
absolutely.
I still genuinely believe that we are not anywhere near. We're not near the end of a rate rise cycle. And the
No,
reason
I
being is
agree.
consumers are still spending too much money.
Yeah, and you look at a lot of the data, and that is something the RBA does harp on about, where when you look at the demand side, there's still plenty of demand there. It hasn't sort of, I suppose, teetered off quick enough just yet. So it does mean that, yeah, there is likely more rate rises, absolutely. Um, it's an interesting one about the banks. And when you look at the Australian banks and the regulatory framework that we operate in, we actually have to maintain a much higher percentage of
Mm-hmm.
cash on hand
Tier
versus
one
the
capital,
European
yep.
banks. That's right, and the US banks. So we've actually got a pretty secure system, I would say, versus the banks overseas, which is good. So yeah, you're right. I agree with that statement you said. Not really going to have a contagion effect fly over here, but inflation is still too high. It is starting to curb down, and I believe it has peaked, but I reckon in the eyes of the RBA, it hasn't been quick enough. So I
Yep.
think, yes, we are still going to see some more rate rises.
And like we've said on previous episodes, central banks have to cause unemployment, because right now there's a belief in the consumer that if they lose their job today, they've got 3 other jobs to walk to tomorrow. So until we see that change in
Yep.
mentality of, YOLO and let's go out and, and do what we want, and
Yep.
we actually have to rein in our books, until we see that, I don't think we're going to see inflation truly under control. So could we be, and I know money markets are pricing in rate cuts, within the next
Mm.
12 months.
Mm.
Honestly, I'm just some poor schlop sitting in the desert, but I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be
No,
that quick.
and I believe the most economists are saying that the unemployment rate actually needs to increase by about 2 percentage points in the US in order for probably that to be the right position for inflation to really drop. And we are well away from that. We're still in the threes. We're still at 3.6%. So we're still far away from that, and that's on the US side. In Australia, it would probably be similar, but not 5, maybe closer to 4.5%. But right now we're still at about that 3.6%. Means the economy needs to slow down a bit. Not as much GDP growth. Last year we had 2.7%. It's a really strong year when you look at our economy expanding. Needs to slow down a bit, probably closer to 1 to 1.5% in order to obviously keep the boat moving forward, but slow down, but to tackle inflation as well.
Yeah. And I think it's a great point to wrap it up on. I mean, I think the end is not here, I guess is what we're trying to say. But if you need to purchase property for the right reasons, then is now a good time? Yeah, if it suits you. Generally speaking, right. If you want to try and time the market, maybe not. Maybe you might be a bit early. If you're happy with that, if you're happy to leave a bit of on the table and come in now and experience another 6 to 12 months of a pullback, and that won't phase you because you're taking a 10, 20-year view, that's fine. But yeah, don't be swayed by the headlines and the sort of the fear-mongering stuff about like we're seeing right now, because a lot of people are approaching us saying, so-and-so saying this, so-and-so saying this. And I always put it back on the client and said, well, what do you think? And they go, well, I don't think it's right yet. I said, there you go.
Yeah, these guys don't have... they don't have that magic crystal ball. No one does.
No, they have KPIs. They've got to sell so many properties per month, and when numbers get low, they'll start to beat the drum. So, but I think we've done a good job there. I think we've covered off on the topics that are important to everyone. So let's wrap it up there. Just as an FYI, bit of homework or housekeeping, I should say. Next month we're going to be doing a webinar with Jeremy on mortgage options. We're seeing some pretty massive rebasing of rates. I've got one client rebasing 2.6 to 7.4 in terms of rate rise.
That's exactly right, Brett. So there's a lot of people that are kicking out from their fixed to the variable, but they're not actually going back and, I suppose, doing their own research on what other options are out there. If you do kick out from a fixed to a variable, I can almost guarantee you your variable rate will be shocking compared to refinancing with either the same bank or a new bank with a very comparable product. Because remember, the bank doesn't have to work that hard to keep you.
Yeah.
You're just kicking out. But if you go back, exactly right. So that is definitely something that Jeremy's been harping on a lot about to a lot of clients. And he's helped a lot of people, I would say, in the last 6 weeks. So we're going to get in front of the camera.
Thousands. Yeah.
That's it. It's going to show us some really good examples.
Yeah. So if you don't like money, then don't attend. But if you do want to work out how to make the most out of your buck and save a bit, then we'll be sending out links in the coming weeks as well too. So, and don't forget below, if you've got any questions or feedback from the podcast, either this one, Expat Mortgage, by all means, put your details below. We've got the Facebook group, Australian Expat Financial Forum, a lot of activity going on there. So please join up. And mate, I think we'll wrap it up there. Next week, I won't be here, so I'll be spending a bit of time with my daughters, but you'll be doing us proud with Mr. Ben Turner, Managing Director for Atlas Tax.
That's right, guys. Wait till next episode. We've got a few good things coming up.
So, mate, I think we'll wrap it up there and see you next time.
No worries, guys. Thanks for tuning in today. See you on the next episode.
Thanks, guys. Take care.